Tonight on News 5 Live, there is no shutdown, but quarantine measures are imposed across the country. Gatherings are now limited to 10 persons. Cutbacks in the huge wage bill. A freeze is imposed on new posts, jobs, and vacation pay in the public service. BTB offers separation package to 35 employees. Government assures the population that there is supply of food in storage for over 6 months. And homeschooling, the new reality for students. Details of these stories and more coming up in tonight's newscast.
With over 100 years of service excellence,
Good evening. Welcome to News 5 Live for Thursday, March 26th. I am Marlene Cuellar. There is no national shutdown, but government today instituted strict safety measures across the country to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. The COVID-19 crisis has paralyzed chunks of Belize's economy and threatens widespread devastation. Countries like Spain, Italy, Iran, and the United States have been experiencing a losing battle against the novel coronavirus. Here in Belize, authorities are putting in measures to contain the 2 confirmed cases. Those cases are in San Pedro town, where a state of emergency has been declared. The island remains on lockdown tonight, and the rest of the country will now comply with quarantine measures, such as a limitation of gatherings now reduced from 25 to 10 persons, and the practicing of social distancing. The Attorney General explained the COVID-19 safety measures when he appeared in today's session of Ask the Experts.
The country is not on lockdown. The country has not been quarantined. That's not the case. All that has happened is that the quarantine authority has issued certain rules for us to follow to ensure that there are best practices in place to prevent the spread or the occurrence of COVID-19 in your area, especially your home. 3 feet away from each other in a public space. If you live on private property, then whatever amount of people live there, if it's more than 10, everybody have to live there. Public transportation, only seating capacity on the bus. And every time the bus stop at a terminal, it must be sanitized, and the people coming on it must sanitize their hands before they get onto the bus, for example. Casinos closed. Spas, beauty salons, barber shops closed. Gyms, sporting complexes are to be closed. Discos, bars, rum shops, nightclubs are to be closed, except restaurants. Those establishments that have a restaurant license are to deal with take-out service only. So if you used to go and sit in a restaurant, you can't do that anymore. Take-out services only. Those restaurants that have liquor licenses, you sell your liquor, or those shops that have liquor licenses, you sell your liquor and you sell your shop, or the shop sells the liquor, you are to, per the license, take that liquor away and not consume it on the premises.
The new normal includes safety measures such as the closure of many business establishments, such as casinos, beauty salons, gyms, bars, and restaurants. Grocery stores will remain open, but owners and managers are asked to adhere to the social distancing rules.
Every business shall ensure that all customers and staff maintain physical distancing of no less than 3 feet in or outside the business. So if you have a shop, based on the size, you can determine how many people are allowed in the shop or not. Depends on the size of the shop. Maybe only 5 makes sense. Only 25 makes sense. However amount of people are in the shop, if you have 25 people in the shop, you must make sure that your shop is big enough that they can be 3 feet away from each other and 3 feet away from each other at the checkout line. If people are in line outside waiting to go into the shop, you must have markers outside indicating 3 feet, so these people in line outside must stay 3 feet away from each other. No person shall host nor attend a private party which includes any person from outside of the immediate household of the house occupant. No more house parties, no more private parties, unless it's being done with people who live at the house. Because remember, the overall theme, we want people to be encouraged to stay home as much as possible. There's to be no recreational or competitive sporting events. No wedding which hosts 10 or more persons other than the bride, bridegroom, official witnesses, and the marriage officer. A banquet, ball, or reception, those are not supposed to happen anymore. No more social events. Any other ceremony of public worship in any facility or public space which involves the participation of any member of the general public. No more public worship. None of that. Certain churches have already discontinued mass celebrations. No funeral except 10 members of the immediate family and at least one officiant and essential mortuary staff. Or a meeting of a fraternal society, private or social club, or civic associations or organization. Lodges, lodge meetings, don't have any more lodge meetings at this point.
The first COVID-19 case was imported. It involves a 38-year-old woman who entered the country after leaving Los Angeles last week Thursday. The Belizean woman was expected to self-isolate, but after landing on the island, she made some errands and visited her mother, who was confirmed to be the second case of COVID-19. The government's attorneys are looking into the law books to determine if there are provisions whereby the woman can be legally charged for not adhering to the self-isolation rules.
There's a general law in the Quarantine Act, and we're certainly looking into that. We have to determine, and we believe that she was warned upon arriving at the airport in Belize to immediately inform the Ministry of Health and to immediately self-isolate. By failing to do that, she may have committed an offense. We're currently looking at that as we speak. And I am telling you, if the evidence lines up that she committed that offense, we will certainly charge her with that offense.
The tourism sector has suffered a trashing from the halting of cruise visits, the closure of businesses, and the locking off of all ports of entry to Belize. Since last week, the Belize Tourism Board shaved off about 1/3 of its employ, with set package agreements for them to be able to brace for the bleak weeks and months ahead, courtesy the novel coronavirus. Director of Tourism Karen Bevans, who has spent much of the past week in meetings with the employees from the board's various departments, says that 35 of the employees whose jobs have been rendered redundant by COVID-19 were offered decent separation packages, and that 33 of the 35 of them accepted theirs. She said that some of the employees have been working for as many as 20 years, and that all of them, even those who have fewer than 5 years, were given severance pay of 2 weeks' salary for each of those years, plus notice pay, along with 3 months' salary and pension for those who were due pension. Only 2 employees did not accept the package, preferring to take the risk and stay on with the remaining 65 employees who will take a salary cut. BTB has also moved all of its operations into one building at the corner of South and Regent Streets to curtail on security and utility expenditures. Government is moving to limit spending and contain expenditures in the public service by imposing a freeze on a number of measures due to the expected economic upheaval relating to COVID-19. A memorandum was issued today by the Financial Secretary directing the relevant authorities to take heed. Now, figures in the PM's budget speech to the House puts the wage bill at $540.5 million, a figure that has doubled over the past 10 years. The budget estimates on page 260 puts personal emoluments at 6,272 officers, but the PM presented a lower figure in his budget speech. With a huge wage bill representing more than 34.5% of the expenditure, government is now looking to trim fat. A 6-month freeze has been placed on new posts, filling of any vacant posts, employment and reemployment, and payment in lieu of vacation leave. Government will not be entertaining staff advances, approval of periodic allowances, workshops, seminars, and non-essential internal travel and non-essential purchasing of supplies, software, and equipment. As it relates to overtime, where necessary, hours must be kept at the very minimum and no more than 20 hours per month. According to the memo, special consideration will be given to healthcare providers. Public Service Union of Belize is calling on government to close all non-essential government offices across the country. Some ministries and departments have decided to close doors while others remain open. The PSU is saying, quote, amid this growing health and economic crisis, coupled with a depleted and unsafe transportation system, the union calls on the government to stop the unnecessary exposure of non-essential service public officers to the spread and contracting of the virus during this period of economic slowdown, unquote. Attorney General Michael Perry today addressed the matter during Ask the Expert session.
I would imagine that discussions would be happening with the public service to ensure that each room where people work cannot have more than 10 people. So the public service would have to make adjustments. And similarly, the public service will have to determine who are those people who can absolutely do their jobs from home and have them do it from home. So the public service would have to go through the same exercise that a regular employer goes through.
25-year-old Erica Vargas, a resident of Orange Walk Town, is the first person on record to be charged with spreading false news. The arraignment follows a stern warning from Attorney General Michael Perry on Wednesday in respect of the dissemination of false information regarding COVID-19. In a social media post on her Facebook account on Monday, Vargas wrote that an entire family in San Jose Village in Orange Walk District had tested positive for coronavirus and that a confirmation would have been made on Tuesday. That information was the furthest from the truth. However, the rumor took on a life of its own when it began circulating on that platform. Earlier today, Vargas, a shelf attendant, was arrested and charged for the offense of spreading false news. During the Senate meeting on Wednesday, AG Perry reminded social media users that propagating fake news is indeed a crime, punishable by law.
I also want to make a plea, and this will be the final public plea because after this we will invoke the Summary Jurisdiction Offences Act. Want to make a plea to people: do not spread false rumors, nor do not give false information to create panic within our society. If you do so, we will fine you and you will be dealt with to the fullest extent of the law, which includes fine and confinement in prison. Listen to what both the leader of the opposition and the Prime Minister have to say. They will give the directions as to the way we are going for the country. But please desist from giving fake news just to hype up and excite people who are already legitimately concerned and scared. Thank you, Mr. President.
As we told you, residents of San Pedro town tonight remain on lockdown. When we checked in today, the streets remain without traffic and Belize's top tourist destination has become a ghost town. Due to the state of emergency, businesses have closed down and social distancing is very much encouraged. Grocery stores are allowed to open for certain hours, but some residents say that they have been having trouble buying their groceries. San Pedro Mayor Daniel Guerrero addressed the concerns this morning on Reef TV.
My name is Ahmad Armoud, calling from local store. We opened this morning and the police would get to come and close me down. We could know what is the problem, or we could open or not.
Grocery stores can open till 10, but you need to practice the social distance and you need to have hand sanitizers or Lysol or soap and water for the clients in and outside the store.
We have all of this, and then I don't allow people to go inside, only three.
Okay, but I will. No, you can go ahead and open. I will just call Mr. Noble and see that check your areas, because we're making sure that the police check that every store is practicing the social distancing and having soap, water, and hand sanitizer. Right now, like we mentioned, we're working based on advice of the Ministry of Health, and the release is until further notice. So as soon as we get a new briefing or a new advice from the ministry, we're gonna be putting out a new release. We have the I think the restaurants and deli that have been questioning, but that again has to go with the recommendations of the health department, or we don't want to do it by ourselves until we get advice from them to see when that will be. And if it does open, it will be strictly deliveries. You won't be able to go and sit at a restaurant. It has to be you call in and they'll deliver or something like that.
Another concern emerging from San Pedro town is that landlords are kicking tenants out who cannot afford rent. These tenants are mostly non-residents of the island who are there for work, but due to the state of emergency and COVID-19, they have become jobless and now fear they may also become homeless. Our newsroom has been flooded with calls by persons saying that landlords are putting tenants out on the streets. But today, Attorney General Michael Perifit stressed that a landlord can only kick a tenant out with a directive from the magistrate's court.
You can only be kicked out by virtue of a directive from the magistrate's court. Landlord can't come and kick you out. Most of these places who have rental agreements, by law, even if you don't have one by law, there must be a period of notice. And usually that notice is at the time when you pay the rent. So if you're paying the rent on a monthly basis, then you have 30 days notice, which is the length of the state of emergency. So you would have to wait until the state of emergency is over. Next thing, if you purposely kick a person out and you know that a person has nowhere else to go, clearly you have taken an action to me that will cause panic and fear, which means under the Summary Jurisdiction Act, if you just do that wantonly like that with no reason, just out of spite, then you are committing an offense. Not only that, no policeman can come and just take somebody out of a residence and say the landlord wants you out. The policeman must have a judicial order that says that. And in this case, in a case of national emergency, we ask the landlords, like everybody else is making a sacrifice, make the sacrifice until we get a handle on the situation in San Pedro. Don't use this opportunity to try and gouge people or to force people into a corner simply because you think you can take advantage of the situation.
Late this evening, we received a recorded message from Prime Minister Dean Barrow appealing for calm and assuring the population of food security. That statement will be aired immediately following this newscast. Coming up, homeschooling is the new way of learning, and we go west, where business has come to a standstill in the Twin Towns. Schools across the country have closed due to COVID-19 as a way to enforce social distancing among the young. It means that thousands of children are now at home and have to adapt to home-based learning. Parents are finding ways to keep the children engaged in learning during school hours, while teachers are creating new online learning plans to keep them on track with the school curriculum. The Ministry of Education says it is encouraging students to take home textbooks so they can practice lessons. Here is News 5's Isani Caetano.
With thousands of students at home sticking to strict social distancing protocols during the existing coronavirus emergency, learning continues. For the next few weeks, all levels of academic life have moved away from the classroom, a transition for some that was already in the offing. From the confines of their homes, primary school children are engaged in distance learning, their daily tuition administered via an online platform.
We meet as a staff and we created what is called a self-explanatory timetable for the parents that the parents can easily follow. Most of the timetable have, like, in the morning, children will learn life skill with their parents, where they clear the table, prepare the table, have breakfast together, wash the dishes. And then after that, we go into a religion period, where they are allowed to learn the Easter all the way up to the Easter story and to the crucifixion of Jesus. So that's what we did right now for the timetable. And then after that, we either get into an English or a math, and then after we have like a science.
It's a syllabus that keeps the students of St. Agnes School in La Democracia fully engaged. While many of them have access to the internet, there are others in the far-flung reaches of the country that don't have online access at their fingertips.
The recommendation is to give them papers to take home to practice. I can't say it any simpler. The Ministry of Education at the primary level also has a free textbook program. We also recommended that students could have taken home those textbooks and do practice work. The idea is for them to practice and keep them meaningfully engaged. And we're also asking parents to bond with their children, to spend time with their children, to play games with them, teach them some life skill, teach them to cook, teach them to clean, but to engage them.
Stephen White, who has been with the Anglican school as its principal for the past 2 years, oversees the daily activities remotely.
The timetable is so simple that we send home the children, most of the children, the government books and the page number they can follow. Children who were not given the government books were given the activity sheet that they can follow. Apart from that, we created a WhatsApp group. And in that WhatsApp group, I monitor all the teachers' WhatsApp groups. So we have a WhatsApp group up to Standard 5, and we monitor the WhatsApp group what they put in. For children who did not come to school, they can go in there and we take picture of the books and we put it in there that they can see the page number they should do daily.
Admittedly, the COVID-19 crisis is nerve-wracking for almost everyone. Notwithstanding the very real threat of contracting the virus even outside of the classroom, some schools insist that students still sit tests and exams at home.
Parents are complaining that principals and teachers are giving them assessment and they must complete certain activities by a certain time, and they're asking them to do online activities, to do tests and other activities. In our memo, the memo coming from the Ministry of Education, we had recommended home-based learning, meaning that teachers were asked to give students a package so that they can practice at home, like maybe do some reading, some writing, some simple mathematics. The objective of the home-based learning is to keep students meaningfully occupied. We really do not expect that children should be given tests or exams at this time.
So what will become of the planned national and regional exams, BJAT, PSC, and CXC?
Everything is on hold until further notice. We just had a virtual meeting with CXC, and as soon as we have finalized those recommendations, we are going to share it with the general public. But we need to first share it with our minister, and the minister has to share it with the national committee. So everything at this point in time is on hold. There will be, at this point in time, we don't even know if there will be a BJAT or a PSC. Everything is on hold until further notice.
Reporting for News 5, I am Isani Caetano.
A main concern in the population is over food security, so thousands are stockpiling food items. A committee called the COVID-19 Food Supply Monitoring Committee met on Tuesday to discuss the country's food stock and mitigation efforts that are to be put in place to ensure that Belizeans have food on their table in the coming months. The committee, which included several stakeholders such as the opposition Hasemai, the private sector, and the NGOs, met to identify and address specific short and medium-term challenges that are expected to arise during this time of crisis. Minister of Food and Agriculture Godwin Holt said on Wednesday that Belize has sufficient basic food and feed grains to sustain the population for over 6 months. There is an adequate amount of staples such as corn, rice, beans, sorghum, and soybean. According to Hulse, there is 2 months' worth of white sugar and 5 months' worth of brown sugar. Poultry remains stable, and beef, pork, and local cheese stocks exceed 6 months. There's also enough vegetable supply of fresh produce. Overall, Minister Holt says that Belize is sitting pretty.
In the case of sugar, we're sitting really, really good. We have a consumption of 12,000 metric tons. We will have a reduced production this year, but we'll be running about 100,000 tons. So we have a lot of sugar, brown and white. The issue there would be if the plant closes down, because the sugar is not in storage. Some sugar is in storage, adequate to take us. There's enough brown sugar to take us through the whole year. There's an oversupply of yellow corn and a good supply of white corn. In fact, the corn normally that we produce goes into Guatemala. There may be some difficulty there, but there is adequate corn. There is more than adequate beans, both in terms of black eye, red, pinto, and soybean, from which we have the oil, cooking oil, and we have already started that process. Again, is in abundant supply, so we don't have a difficulty there. Rice, there is no threat. Rice, we are sitting at 14 million pounds in a country that uses 12. So we have a whole air supply, and there's a crop in the ground. Hopefully we get some rains, hopefully that continues. In terms of vegetables are perishable, so you don't store vegetables. The vegetables are coming in from the farmers, but if we do have to bring out of Mexico, we have already put in a mechanism to ensure that that comes in. There is no gouging. In terms of meat, again, there's adequate poultry, adequate eggs, adequate beef. Fish products, again, we have tilapia and we have shrimp if you put that as a crustacean into that mix. We may have to start to eat some of our own bananas, and we definitely have to eat our own oranges as fruits for the table. There's not a problem there.
Earlier this week, transport authorities met with the Belize Bus Association and other bus officials to discuss the movement of persons across the country. Several large operators closed off their operations while others scaled back on their runs because of COVID-19 concerns. That meeting saw the introduction of new measures in response to the interruption in public transportation. Some of the operators who had taken their buses off the highways have resumed limited service. A release issued on Wednesday noted that buses will only take passengers who are seated, so no standees are allowed. Other provisions have also been made to sanitize the buses, and commuters are also being asked to do their part. During today's Ask the Experts live session, Attorney General Michael Perifete summarized the measures.
People, may for better or for worse, need to move around the country. And if they have to go to work or choose to go to work, we're limiting the transportation on the buses to the seating capacity of the bus. So if the bus only seats 30 people or 25 people, that's the maximum amount of people that can be on the bus. The seating capacity, no standing on the buses. Every bus operator arriving at the terminal must instruct the passengers to disembark and oversee the sanitization of the bus by the person on site. Whenever a bus stops at a terminal, everybody must come off, even if that's not your last stop. The bus must be sanitized, and the people, before they come back off, have to be sanitized, along with new passengers that are coming onto the bus.
You can visit the government press office page on Facebook to find the full bus schedules. In San Pedro and Belize City, residents have generally been staying home and activities on the streets have slowed down as a result of the measures to prevent the spread of the virus. Today we checked in on the situation in the West. Local officials in San Ignacio, Santa Elena have met to discuss their contingency plan should they experience an outbreak of COVID-19. The meeting was led by the Cayo North and Central area representatives and Mayor Earl Trapp. Freelancer Kent Pandy caught up with Minister Omar Figueroa following the meeting, where he outlines what transpired.
A meeting was convened this morning here at the San Ignacio Santa Elena Town Board. We had some of the key leaders in our community present. We had the mayor, we had Dr. Cuellar from the San Ignacio Hospital, we had Minister Montero, we had a representative from NEMO. And we basically just had a discussion on how we can prepare in the eventuality that the COVID-19 should reach our twin towns. Of course, we had to stress the importance of trying to do whatever we can to prevent the virus from making it to our community. And one of the key things, as Dr. Cuellar stressed, is that social distancing is isolation. And so we want to encourage all the community folks here in San Ignacio, Santa Elena, Bully Tree, to just stay at home. I mean, there is no need to be going out right now. The virus can only spread if humans transfer it from one place to another. So for right now, we want to stress the importance of just staying at home. The Ministry of Health, through Dr. Cuellar and NEMO, we all have a plan, a structure in place in the eventuality that it reaches here. We will do whatever we can to ensure that it is contained and that we fight this. As a community, we need to be each other's keepers. We need to stand together. And if we do that, I think at the end of the day, with God's guidance and His blessing, we will overcome.
We also spoke with Mayor Earl Trapp and Western Regional Commander Senior Superintendent Lyndon Flowers. They both outlined areas that they are working to enforce and manage to keep things flowing smoothly in the towns of Santa Elena and San Ignacio.
For now, what we are trying to do is encourage the business establishments to remain open. What we don't want to do is create another problem. If we should close all the business establishments, imagine what will happen. People will need food, so eventually they will begin to vandalize, they will begin to loot. We don't want that. So we're encouraging all business establishments to remain open, and while we're praying that the virus will not spread. Once the people can get food for their loved ones, they're good. The market remains open, and we still continue to manage it in a way that we have only a certain amount of people in the market at any one time. So we continue to encourage the social distance. With respect to assisting the more needy people, the poor people, I'm sure that some help will be coming from some Good Samaritan within the community. As is, I can tell you that the San Ignacio and Santa Elena Town Council have already begun a drive to get donations to assist some of the more needy people. And when that time's come around, then the council will do its part to assist.
I'm asking the residents in the entire Cayo district, in the entire country, the police are out there to help to protect and preserve law and order, out there to help to protect your business establishments. The resorts that have closed down, the bus runs have been reduced, but we need social distancing. I cannot ask you enough to do that. The police are going to be out there to enforce. We have the statutory instruments about overcrowding buses, which should not have been happening from the gatherings of 25 people or more. Stay home, reduce the visits. We've asked the business establishments to discontinue selling alcohol, to limit the amount of persons. You'll see the sign here at the mayor's office where it speaks one person. The distance you go into the supermarkets or the stores, wherever it is, keep your distance.
The Statistical Institute of Belize has released its most recent figures as it relates to the Consumer Price Index and External Trade Bulletin. Last month, consumer prices increased slightly as the cost of airfare, school fees, and home rentals went up by 0.4%. Conversely, food and LPG prices were down. When compared to February 2019, those figures have increased marginally. In respect of housing, water, and electricity, February saw an overall increase of 0.8% over the same period last year. While domestic exports were down by roughly 33% in February, imports went up by a little over 3%. The total value of imports last year amounted to $150.5 million. That represents an increase of $4.5 million more than last year. After the break, a warm welcome for Cuban health personnel. The world-class Cuban health system is contributing across the world in the fight against the novel coronavirus. Belize and Antigua and Barbuda are the two most recent countries to receive health personnel from the island country. A second team of Cuban doctors is expected in the country to assist in the containment of the virus. The first group, from the Henry Reeve Brigade, comprises specialists in disasters and epidemics. They arrived on Wednesday at the Philip Goulson International Airport. Here is News 5's Dwayne Moody with that report.
For the next 3 months, 62 healthcare professionals from Cuba will be living in Belize, supporting our local health system as the country fights the COVID-19 pandemic. On Wednesday, a chartered flight with the first cohort touched down at the Philip Goulson International Airport. They disembarked, ready to be deployed to respective medical facilities.
We want to have them in Belize City and for the isolation and ICU unit in KHMH. I think that is where we need it most. Around the country, like I spoke to the ambassador from Cuba, we also have brigades here that are working with us. We already know the listing and which specialty they have, and they will be able to be deployed anywhere else in the country that we need them. But this is the first group of 62 medical officers. 32 of them are here, and it feels a relief for all of us for us to be able to count on Cuba.
According to head of the Cuban Medical Brigade, Dr. Rogel Luis Ramirez, one of the characteristics of the Cuban Revolution is to help other countries in need of medical support. The principles that they teach their medical doctors and healthcare professionals are humanity and solidarity to others. Like Belize, Dr. Ramirez says that the few confirmed cases in Cuba were imported.
Nuestro país en estos momentos está en la primera fase.
Our country, Cuba, is in the first stage of the facing the pandemic. So we are at the first stage. The cases that we have are basically imported. I mean, people that have been traveling, foreigners, and then they've been. So there are few cases in Cuba. We are following the protocol for the stage 1, basically. That's what we are doing in Cuba.
The medical professionals were then transported to their individual quarters that will be home to them for the next 3 months in the first instance, such as the Radisson Fort George in Belize City. That, along with a number of donations from Lord Michael Ashcroft, the Taiwanese government and businesses, will assist with the medical response.
I want to give thanks right now publicly to Ashcroft. He has donated $10 million right now directly to the Ministry of Health for whatever need we want. He has also donated the Fort George area, the hotel, for us to be able to host these people free of cost. This is something that the people need to do. This, again, I mentioned, no political, no fighting between us. It is us joining together for the cause of our Belizean people, and that is what we're doing.
This is the 25th anniversary of diplomatic ties between Cuba and Belize, but medical brigades have been in country since the early 1980s. CEO Luan Burns of the Foreign Ministry says a token of appreciation was returned to Cuba.
There was a very kind group of business people, and we'll share the list with you of their names after, headed by Mr. Dinesh Bojwani, who in a matter of hours secured assistance in the form of donations of sheets and towels and soap and other things to go to Cuba so that it wasn't one way. So we know that there is an economic blockade in Cuba. We know that it is difficult, so it would not have been right for Belize to ask for equipment. But what they offer is expertise. What they offer is human capacity. And we offered what we could in terms of whatever we could put on that plane to fill it, to show as an act of goodwill. And my thanks to those business people who acted so fast and said to me, when I said, you know, we really need to recognize you, they said, you know, it's our duty. We have to do this in solidarity because these people are helping us. And never forget that they've left their families, as Minister said, their young ones, at a time where everything is uncertain.
Dwayne Moody for News 5.
In other news, an Orange Walk man was found dead in a pond. Police say that no injuries were observed on the body, and it is suspected that Nolasco Gonzalez, a resident of Santa Marta Village, drowned. A post-mortem is scheduled to take place to determine the cause of death. Senior Superintendent of Police Alberto Romero shares the details of the incident.
Baltasar Campos, 55 years. Legion reported that he made checks for one Nolasco Gonzalez on the Santa Marta Road, where he found Nolasco Gonzalez motionless in a pond of water. Information is that Nolasco Gonzalez was repairing a water pump in the pond when he fell, and thereafter his body was found. Post-mortem examination will be conducted to determine the cause of death.
Sir, based on the information you've received, is the suspicion is that he drowned?
That is what is suspected at this time.
Police are looking for 4 men who committed a robbery and shooting in Bella Vista Village earlier this week. On Monday, the assailants held up a security guard and robbed him of his cell phone and some money. The robbers then lured out another man from the southern village, and when he tried to escape, they shot him. Senior Superintendent Alberto Romero tells us more.
Nahun Banegas, security guard of Bella Vista, reported that he was heading home on a bicycle when he was ambushed by 4 male persons who proceeded to rob him of his personal belongings and cash. Thereafter, the robbers forced him to make a phone call to his landlord so that the landlord would come to that area. Shortly thereafter, the landlord came to the area, and that is when Nahum Banegas ran away and made good escape from the robbers. At some point, an attempt was made to apprehend the landlord, but he fought off the robbers, and as a result, he was shot once, and thereafter he made good his escape, and he proceeded to the Southern Region Hospital, where he was treated and released.
Do you believe it's a crime of chance, or at least new?
Yes, from the information we have got is that yes, they are persons that are familiar with the landlord, and he was lured to that area in an attempt that he be robbed. Again, we are seeking these 4 male persons in connection to this report.
Sir, do you know any idea who these persons may be, the assailants?
We believe they are from that area of Bella Vista.
An argument between in-laws has left one person hospitalized and another facing an attempted murder charge. Police say that during the early hours of Tuesday morning, a family was socializing at a house in Belize City when they got into a dispute, and one man pulled out a knife and stabbed another multiple times.
At about 1:50 a.m., police visited the Carl Houston Memorial Hospital, where they observed Nelson Alberto Jr. with apparent stab wounds to his body. What police gathered so far is that Nelson Alberto Jr. was at his residence at Grants Alley along with other family members socializing when a dispute ensued between family members, and as a result of that, one of the family members inflicted the side injuries to him. He is presently admitted in a stable condition at this moment. Police arrested and charged Robert Roches Edison, 27 years old, of a Grants Alley address, for the crime of attempted murder, use of deadly means of harm, and dangerous harm.
So what is the relation between the victim and the person charged?
They are in-laws.
Police say they still haven't been able to determine who was driving the mini SUV that was involved in a fatal crash on Tuesday morning. Dorian Anthony was killed when a vehicle he was traveling in experienced a rare tire blowout and crashed into a parked trailer container at mile 13 on the George Price Highway. Gary Trapp and Dan Myers were also inside the vehicle. They suffered minor injuries and have since been released from the hospital.
They observed a vehicle red in color under a trailer that was parked on the left-hand side of the road. And inside of the vehicle, they saw the motionless body of a male person who was later identified as Dorian Anthony, 43 years old, of a Knott Creek address. Police understand is that the vehicle was traveling from Belize City towards Hattieville when the vehicle experienced a blowout, and the vehicle collided on the trailer that was parked on the left-hand side of the road. Traveling with him were 2 other male persons who were treated and discharged on the same day.
Sir, have you all determined who the driver was?
Not at this moment that I know. I know that the person that was found inside the vehicle was between the driver and the passenger side, the front passenger side of the vehicle.
Sir, the owner of that vehicle is who? Was it one of the gentlemen inside?
Well, that is something with the investigation that we have at this moment, and we are following it up.
Did they indicate if they were speeding and that may have resulted in that blowout?
That was not mentioned, but we suspect that that was one of the factors that caused the vehicle to overturn and afterwards ended up under the trailer, no?
When we come back, commercial banks are prepared to work with indebted customers.
When we started to build our house, we knew that we would have to enjoy living in it for the
Financial institutions stand ready to work with their respective customers during this time of economic catastrophe. The Central Bank of Belize, led by Governor Joy Grant, has been instrumental not only in securing funds for relief, but also for working with commercial banks to lower their interest rates during this period. According to Grant, most banks are fully on board with the idea of holding off on payments until after a 3-month period to allow for customers to defray other expenses related to COVID-19.
The cooperation from the banks has really been stellar,
And what they have agreed to do primarily is to look at the loans that will need to be refinanced. There are different approaches. One bank took the position that every loan that was performing on their books, they would give a moratorium of 3 months for principal and interest. And if you don't want the moratorium, then it was up to you to get in touch with the bank to say that you don't want it. The others have taken the position that you will come into the bank and negotiate with them about what is the best thing for you. So interest rates, in some instances, are being reduced. The period for repayment, those are being extended. For tourism, which is being hit the hardest, for non-performing loans, we've reduced the amount that they have to make provision for from 100% to 50%, which means that they have more money out there to lend to other people. And it's important, too, that the bank has agreed to 2% lowering of the liquidity ratio, which puts an additional $58 million with the banks for them to lend. Because it's all good to say that we're going to give people some relief on repayment, but we have to get additional money out there because people must be ready for when the tourists or when business starts up again, that they're in a position to start.
Since the outbreak of COVID-19 worldwide, hand sanitizers and alcohol are virtually non-existent in stores and supermarkets. Washing your hands frequently with soap and water is one of the best ways to fight COVID-19. But if soap is not available, hand sanitizers are the second choice. To satisfy the local demand for hand sanitizers, Minister of Food and Agriculture Godwin Holtz announced on Wednesday that there are local distilleries looking to produce the item.
I had contacted the people in the health department to look at hand sanitizers. There are some distilleries now who are beginning to produce that, and I've been told that the orange oil is an excellent hand sanitizer. We have several containers in storage. So Belize is sitting fairly pretty in this. What we need to do, however, is to maintain the labor, I don't like the word laborers at all, the workers and the co-supporters in the industry, these women who are cleaning chickens, who are doing all of this, who are doing that work, we need to support them. We have an issue with the migrant workers, which the Ministry of Labor is working with us on, because as you know, majority of our workers in citrus and bananas are migrant workers. But overall, Belize is sitting pretty. Our small population is helping us with our food supply, the fact that we are on the ground with it, and also the fact that because of our small population, we are not so jammed up, I think will help us to get through this crisis.
Coming up after the break, a private health facility prepares for COVID-19 patients.
Streaming made easier.
Belize Healthcare Partners Limited, a private facility, is taking a different approach to deal with an anticipated health crisis in the case of a COVID-19 outbreak. The hospital is functioning as normal, but it has also prepared to accept patients that may be affected by the virus and has converted a section of the facility into an intensive care unit. News 5's Dwayne Moody headed to Healthcare Partners to see the transformation.
Belize Healthcare Partners Limited continues to function as normal and stands ready with its staff to provide medical services to COVID-19 patients. Since the outbreak in Wuhan, China, and realizing that it would evolve into a pandemic, the private medical facility has been preparing its medical professionals and staff for the eventuality. Now there are 2 confirmed cases of the virus, and at this time it is contained on Ambergris Key. But in the event that it spreads to mainland, the institution has retrofitted isolation units for COVID-19 patients at its facility.
This hospital, from the time it was built, all the rooms were equipped with medical air and medical gases. So in essence, that made it possible for us to create a physical barrier separation between a set of rooms and the rest of the hospital. The area where we are now, the isolation unit, is self-contained. We have at present 3 rooms set aside, 2 with ventilators, 1 for patients who may be ill but not requiring ventilation. We plan to expand by 2 more rooms. So in essence, we should be able to have 4 ventilation-capable rooms and 1 room set aside for patients who don't require ventilations.
Chief of Staff Dr. Andre Sosa says that given the necessary provisions as it relates to personal protective gear and ventilators, the private hospital can become a 14-room intensive care unit hospital.
We have to be with our patients, with the Belizean people, both in the good times and in the bad times. There is an emergency that is looming, and we have to prepare for the worst-case scenario, in which case there won't be any differentiation between private and public entities. In the event of a national emergency, we are prepared to do our part. Certainly there's a lot of apprehension. Nobody wants to die.
In this epidemic, all of us are at risk. Some of us are more vulnerable than others. No? And that's essentially why I preferred the last time, that we need to care for our elderly people, and especially for those that have some medical background. And I refer to those patients that have history of hypertension, congestive heart failure, patients that have history of chronic bronchitis, emphysema. In Belize, what is the other group of patients we need to look after is the patients with diabetes, because those patients with diabetes, most of the time, the diabetes also lead to us to develop other conditions.
For some time now, the medical facility has installed sanitation posts manned by a nurse who, guided by the Ministry of Health Advisory, checks persons to differentiate between patients who have respiratory complications similar to that of COVID-19 and those with other health conditions.
There is a welcome committee for patients, and it essentially is a nurse who takes the person's temperature, makes the hand sanitizer available, but also goes through a checklist of questions to identify those who might have fever, coughing, any symptoms that could be related to COVID-19. But given the fact that we are in the flu season still and that there are people with cough and cold, we have to check everyone. The COVID-19 patient won't come with a name tag or with an ID saying that he or she has it. At the same time, too, we have to protect our other patients. We do carry on with hemodialysis here. We have ill patients with other conditions where their immune systems are compromised, and of course the general patient population.
Around the hospital, there are various signs to promote proper hand-washing techniques and social distancing when entering the facility. There's also a hotline number which persons can call if they believe they have symptoms of COVID-19.
Doctor on the line will make the necessary questions and queries, and then they will advise you as to what to do.
where you can seek help. As it is, our pharmacy also has made provisions to be able to deliver medications to your home so that you don't have to come out.
Dwayne Moody for News 5.
Up next in Healthy Living, we look at what women can do when home is not the safest place.
With over 100
Typically in March, Belize would celebrate Women's Month with a plethora of activities that would celebrate women as well as bring to focus the issues specific to our gender. All those activities, though, have been shelved as the world now focuses on the COVID-19 pandemic. But gender-based violence is still a genuine threat for many women across the country. Health experts continue to advocate for more people to stay home to reduce the spread of the virus and ultimately stay safe. So what do women do when being at home is the least safe place to be? Tonight in Healthy Living, we find out more about what you can do to protect yourself or your loved one during this time. The shuttered stores and empty streets across the country prove that many Belizeans are listening to the advice of health experts to stay home and stay safe. Yes, this is the best way to stop any potential spread of COVID-19, but it leaves a lot of people gravely exposed to something worse. Agencies like the National Women's Commission are issuing their own warning about the possible escalation of gender-based violence.
When it comes to this situation, the aspect of isolation and the aspect of staying at home definitely increases risk for certain populations, particularly those who experience gender-based violence, one of them being domestic violence or sexual violence.
Families are already in crisis as they grapple with layoffs, pay cuts, or meeting the cost of stocking up to stay home, and the general feeling of loss of control as no one can tell us what's going to happen next. All these factors are amplifying the risks for people in abusive situations.
Gender-based violence, that it's really rooted in power and control. And so the fact that people who are unable to manage these type of concerns in a positive way, then often it could lead to them being able to exert violent control over those around them. It could be their partners, it could be their elderly parents, it could be their children as well. And so it's something that we definitely have to look at.
Even if there is no job loss, sharing a space to work from home can bring its own complications.
Sometimes those are the times that maybe those persons were able to access services or go ask for help, or to be able to just go with someone and talk about what is going on. Not being able to step out of their homes or not having that space because they are there in their home, it adds another burden as well. The fact that they will think that even if they access the services, they will contract the disease in some way.
So what can you do to prepare for this potentially dangerous time? 1. Create a safety plan.
Every case is different. Yeah. People need to be aware of patterns that their partners already exhibit as to when exactly these violent incidents will occur. And a lot of times they have a sense there are certain triggers that they can begin to see. So be aware of that. If possible, depending on where you are, it's advisable for them to remove themselves from the situation, if possible, to maybe a safer place in the homes. And we know that this is a challenge because a lot of our families live in very confined spaces. When you look at the issues of weapons, know where these weapons are, try as best as possible to minimize the threat of these, hide them and things like that. 2. Create codes to ask for help. For example, if you have a neighbor, you can let them know, well, you know what, this is a code that I can use. I will use, and you know that something is going on, so it's not very evident and the person doesn't have to know that I am asking for help.
3. Make a plan for your children.
For those who have children, depending on the age range and the maturity of their children, how best to let them know. Most of the time the children know. Yeah. A lot of the times they're also victims of abuse. So how do you also help them understand avenues of how to get out of the house the easiest and the fastest and safest way? What are the codes that we can use as a family to know that this is escalating? How do you help children understand, the coding, the numbers to call? A lot of times children, we think that they don't understand certain things, but they can learn who to call and how they can evade, especially if they're smaller, to how to come out, but always try to protect their children at all times. They have to look at the threat to life, the more imminent threat to life, in that instance, not only on themselves, but also on their children. I think often when it comes to these type of situations, people are unable to even act because of just the level of stress in that situation. And so it's important for them to try.
Every year from 2016 to 2018, there were over 2,000 reported cases of domestic violence in Belize. The total numbers for 2019 are not available as yet. Williams warns that these numbers are just a small part of what the situation really is in our country. So as everyone shuts their doors to shelter at home, she urges families and communities to not shut out their loved ones.
We keep hearing at this moment in the various situations, we are our brothers and sisters keepers. It's important for us to actually act on it.
Once again, if you'd like to know more about creating your own safety plan or need information on how to help your loved one, you can call the Women's Department at 615-1780 or 615-2252. In a severe or potentially life-threatening situation, call your nearest police station. And that's the news. Don't forget that tonight's broadcast is available in both text and streaming video at channel5belize.com. You can also connect with us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/News5Live. I'm Marlene Cuellar. Thanks for joining us. And from all of us here at News 5, remember to wash your hands and maintain social distancing. Good night.